Hey everybody, really quick before we start tonight's video, I would like to announce that I have made a second channel. This second channel will be a place for shorter narration videos, story series, classic creepypastas, gaming streams, and anything else that piques my interest. I will have a link for it in the top of the description, and the pinned comment. It would mean a lot to me if you guys could go subscribe to it, and help me get the first 1,000 subscribers. I also already have a video posted on there for you to enjoy once you're done here, so if you guys could help me out on that, it'd be greatly appreciated. It's always nice to have a backup channel just in case anything ever happened to this one. Not that I expect anything to happen to this one, but I just want to have it there just in case and be able to upload things to it that I wouldn't normally do on this channel. So again, if that piques your interest, definitely go check it out, as I will appreciate it very much. Now, on to tonight's video. Tonight, I will be telling 6 stories. We will be starting things off with a very dark ritual. This story has plenty of thrill in it, so don't go trying it yourself. I wouldn't want any of you to get hurt, because if you did, who would watch my videos? No, but seriously, your health should always be of main concern, so don't try it yourself. Then, I will be telling stories of night shifts, hitchhikers, strange wishes, a potential imaginary friend, and lastly, a story involving some weird happenings on late night TV. That's quite the lineup if you ask me. All of these stories were sourced from the No Sleep forum on Reddit. The talented and generous authors over there have been kind enough to allow me to share their stories with you. So, if you enjoy a story, you can find the link in the description where you can upvote their story, leave feedback, or whatever it is you wish to do. Remember, you can send in your own story to rylhstories@gmail.com. Likes and comments are always appreciated if you enjoy. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. There is an eccentric rule passed down in my family from generation to generation. Not really a rule, more like a ritual. I don't even know where it came from, nor why my family knew of its existence. But there is one thing I'm sure of. My great-grandparents, my grandparents, and even my parents had relied on it to get by when the worst comes to worst. Even I have need of it sometimes. This ritual is something that only comes into effect when being performed in the dead of night, when the sky is pitch black and the dim, fragile light of the moon is swallowed by the darkness casted over everything. Once it begins, there's no turning back. You have no choice but to see it through no matter what. And it will only come to an end when the first sunray of the next day chases the shadow of the night away. Fortune comes to those who succeed, enough to make your life like that of a king's without working for months. But anyone who fails it will only meet their doom. I know it's dangerous, even life-threatening. Everyone in my family knows that. Still, nobody can resist the urge to resort to it when the most desperate moment strikes. If no measure comes, they will have to starve to death. The ritual might be deadly, but it promises more than they can ever wish for, as long as they don't mess it up. And that's why I'm here, standing in my bathroom, holding the rag doll gotten from the market nearby, with a kitchen knife clutched tightly in my other hand. I made a stupid mistake, and lost my job last month. It seemed that luck wasn't on my side, as every place I went to an interview after that unfortunate incident turned me down at once. I moved from place to place. My legs turned numb from all the walking I forced upon them, but still ended up unemployed. Rent was coming up, and I know that if I fail to earn enough cash to cover it, I'll be kicked out of my place faster than I can blink. Money. I need money right now. As much money as possible. I know that turning to this ritual was probably one of my dumbest decisions, but I've run out of things to fall back on. Taking a deep breath, I stole a look at the doll in my fingers. It was a typical doll. The one that you can come across in every toy aisle, in every shopping center out there. Black hair made of strips of wool reaching its knees. A red dress sewed onto its body, heightened by the pale shade of its skin. Why did people choose to produce such a pale doll? More importantly, among all the decent looking ones, how come I picked this thing? Its eyes were 2 little black buttons, etched onto its face by matching colored threads, and its pink lips froze in a wide smile. It looks just like every other doll out there, but something about it gave me an uneasy feeling. The more I look at its black eyes, the more it reminds me of 2 black voids. Pitch black, no bottom in sight, no telling if there is actually anything lurking underneath. Easing my troubled heart, telling myself to just calm down, I carefully place the doll into the tub full of water I have prepared earlier, making sure it is positioned properly on the porcelain bottom. The cold water licked on my skin, and I shivered profusely. Is it because of the iciness seeping into my veins, or because of the fear and apprehension eating me from the inside out? I don't know. The offering is already in place now. All I need to do is give an invitation. I purse my lips, again going through all the choices in my head. This can cost me my life. Do I really need this? But then, the idea of having to wander the street empty-handed slipped into my head. I cannot live like that. I've performed this ritual before, just a few years earlier. I made it once. I can make it again. Having made up my mind, I slid the blade of the kitchen knife across my forearm. It cut through my skin like butter, forming a red line on its path, and I winced as a wave of pain infiltrated my nervous system. The cut was deep, and blood started spurting from it freely, running down my forearm, leaving a scarlet trail behind as though trying to form a route to something. I know what it is. Either a life full of wealth and fortune, or no life at all. The red trail of blood on my white skin goes on gushing down until it reached my elbow, and begins dripping into the bathtub where the rag doll is sitting quietly underneath the cold water. 1 droplet, 2 droplets, 3, 4, 5. The transparent, mirror-like water has already turned into a faint shade of red right now. Whenever my blood touched the water, its surface will distort and warp, making the image of the doll beneath twist in an unusual way. I summon you, the lost spirits of the world. Hear my call and come to play my game. My victory, your treasure. Your victory, my soul to take. Silence. I was greeted with no answer, but my blood suddenly stopped flowing freely. I didn't do anything, didn't apply any pressure on the wound, yet the blood simply stops dripping. I know what this means. The game has started, and now, all I need to do is wait for them to arrive. They will inform me. They always do. I made my way out of the bathroom and closed the door. I didn't lock it though. Besides, such a thing will not be able to stop them, so why bother trying? As the door slides into frame from the other side, within that freezing cold, empty bathroom, out of the blue, the sound of something pulled out from the water infiltrated my ear, as light as a pin on the floor, but to me, it was just the same as the roar of thunder. They have arrived, ready to get me at any moment. I'm ready to, but even so, I cannot stop my limbs from quivering and my breath from turning ragged. My heart is pounding frantically inside my rib cage, as though it had fallen out of its holder and was now jumping from place to place. Telling myself to calm down once more, I strolled across my room and sat down by my table, trying to lighten up my mood by messaging my best friend. However, it appears that she isn't online right now, as I received no response. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed, and right at its top, I saw a notification popping up. Their confirmation. I'm in your bathroom. Tensions begin rising, and the air suddenly gets so brittle, as if it can snap at any moment. I tighten my fists, suppressing my arising anxiety and fear before straightening up and letting out a long breath to calm myself down. I've done this before. I can do it again, and I can win the game. I stood still in my spot, listening to the silence around me, trying to spot anything unusual. Normally, I would enjoy being in a dark, silent room, as it allows me to find my center and let my mind go elsewhere without anyone bothering me. But now, all this silence was nothing but a torment. In the dark, I cannot see a thing, cannot tell if anyone is hiding in the corners, watching me from afar, waiting for a chance to jump at me. Perhaps a skinny, contorted figure with twisted limbs and mouth so big that its jaw dropped onto the floor was quietly staggered towards me from behind. Or perhaps several unusual-looking limbs were stretching down from above, waiting for the chance to pull me up and swallow me whole. Darn it. Why is my creativity going into high gear in such a situation? Then I hear it. A soft creaking sound emitting from the bathroom door. As it slides open, even though nobody was in the room but me, a foul odor suddenly pierced through my nose, a total assault to my senses. It was like the smell of a dead body left underneath the summer weather for days. Fighting back the urge to retch and empty my entire dinner onto the floor, I try to keep a straight face and advance toward my bed. It appears that nothing has changed. Their ways of doing things are still the same. I mentally let out a cheer of both joy and relief. I remember all of the patterns of the previous ritual. I can triumph over them. As long as I don't show any trait of fear and don't make any sound, I'll be alright. Every time my foot touches the floor, I can hear a slight sound of footsteps right beside me. It's almost inaudible, like echoing from a faraway land, but undoubtedly, it was there. Apparently, whatever followed me. It's soaked from head to toes, as I can pick up the sound of water hitting the ground in accordance with each step it takes. The horrible odor is getting stronger and stronger. My face is already turned into an unhealthy shade of pale. I don't know if I can hold on any longer. I swallow and proceed to walk a bit faster, pretending that I'm not affected by this at all. I cannot show them that I'm afraid. Suddenly, the sounds of footsteps started amplifying behind my back. All my hairs stand up and my face turned birch white. But before I can do anything, something heavy had already bounced onto my back and latched onto me like a python. Harsh breathing pierced through my ears. Breathing that is not mine. My eyes turned as wide as the size of tennis balls, and my orbs quivered. This is new. They have never pulled this trick before, and I let my guard down. For once, I almost screamed, putting a bloody end to both the game and my life in a flash. Once I show a moment of fear, a moment of weakness, they will not hesitate to tear me apart. I purse my lips, and despite the fact that my back is forced to bend over from the weight of whatever just jumped onto me, I keep on walking, pretending that it isn't there. That thing is panting heavy into my ear now, blowing unpleasant smelling breath onto my face, and I almost passed out. Just to make things worse, some kind of liquid was gushing down my back right now. Sticky, icky, smoldering liquid. I don't even dare to think about what it can be. Fortunately, as soon as I reached my bed, the eerie thing clinging on to me along with its stinky breath and nasty liquid vanished. I don't know where it has run off to, but I don't have the mind nor the gut to concern about that. Straightening my back, I crawl into my bed and pull the blankets up until it reached my chest as I curled up on my comfortable mattress. The blanket cannot shield me from their reach. Nothing but the dawn can, but I don't feel at ease sitting in this room, in the darkness, with knowing force trying to take my soul without something to cover me up. I tightened my hands into fists and bit my lips, suppressing my fears, trying not to let anything get to me. My orbs darted around the room in high alert, looking for anything unusual. What will they throw at me next? My attention was jerked to my room's front door as someone, or something, knocked onto it. Then a scratch, followed by one, and another, until the sounds become so deafening that my ears hurt. It was like thousands of demons were awaiting at my door, dragging their sharp fingernails along its wooden surface. Then they start banging, so hard that I can start to feel afraid that my door will be sent across the room. Don't show that you are scared. They can't do anything if you just stay calm and don't make a sound. I know that, but that isn't enough to stop my heart from racing and my fingers from clenching my blanket so tightly that all my knuckles turned white. Then, out of nowhere, I heard humming. The scratching and banging gradually died out, and a melodious sound flooded into the room, erasing the eerie, spine-chilling ambience. For a while, I had actually let myself flow with the heavenly piece of music. There was no lyric, just a humming that keeps picking on higher notch. Yet, it is even more mellifluous than that of all the renowned songs in the world combined. As I was immersed in the tune, it suddenly warps into whining, then whimpering. The most beautiful song I have ever heard, in a flash, morphed into the most horrific sound I've ever heard in my life. There was no warning. It just simply shifted tone and transformed into the cries and whimpers of someone who has just experienced all the traumas and pains in the universe. A melancholy chain of weeping, making my skin crawl in apprehension. I swallow, hard. This cannot be good. This cannot be good at all. They have never done this before, and I don't know what I am supposed to expect, to brave myself for. My closet's door burst open. Have I not prepared myself at first? I would have jumped from my spot and lost the game. At first glance, I can see that there was something bundled up on the floor of my closet, crying and sobbing nonstop. Then, to my horror, I realized that it isn't any sort of bundle, but a woman herself, a distorted and disfigured woman whose bones appeared to have been crushed into dust, leaving her crumbling down in a ghastly position. Looks like someone has tried to literally squish her, mercilessly twisted and cracked her until she was shaped into this non-human shape. Her posture resembles that of a python curling up, limbs bending and twisting in awkward angles. Torso and waist no longer seem to be intact, her head placed atop of that very mess. Blood leaks from her eyes' corners as her long black hair cascaded down like a black stream. Her face froze in sheer agony, her expression distorted and almost animal-like. Her expression was so contorted that her skin crumpled beyond belief. Wrinkles and folds shaped her face into something that can send my worst nightmare under the bed shaking in fear. Her mouth is as wide as my head itself, and she is crying her heart out, destroying my ears along the way. There was no word that can describe the bone-chilling sounds she released. They're like the screeching noises of fingernails scratching on a chalked board, mixed with the frightened screams of animals getting run over on roads combined. I bit my lips, doing everything in my willpower to not go mad and do something I will regret. The night is still young. Who knows what else they have in store for me? I cannot give up now. As long as I succeed, as long as I can make it through the night, all the best things in the world will be mine all along. Then the phone started to ring. My heart almost stopped right in my chest. Eyes wide, mouth agape, breath caught in my throat, face completely turned white. I stared in disbelief at the object laying innocently next to me on my bed. The shining screen of my cell phone looks up at me, with the name of my best friend flashing atop it. I have forgotten to turn it off after receiving their message. Oh no. Blood drained from my face, and I instantly wiped my face upward, only to come face to face with a mouthful of needle-like teeth and a pair of eyes resembling black voids themselves. Blood was dripping from the gap between each tooth perpetually, tainting my bed sheets as that not-human mouth curled into an ear-to-ear grin. You lost. Panic rose from the pit of my stomach, immersing me whole. For a while, I was so stunned by the fear and terror eating me from inside out that I couldn't do anything. Then, instinct took over me, screaming to me that I cannot let such a bloody end seal my fate. I don't even know where my bravery comes from. Probably my will to live and not be chewed to death by those frightening teeth. But at that time, I didn't even bother to think twice. With all my power, I struck that thing across the face over and over, and managed to knock it on the floor with an almost flawless right hook. Then, as it was struggling to get back onto its feet and finish me off, I jumped off my bed and bolted out of the room with a speed that not even lightning has to be jealous of. That was the story of about an hour ago. I am now in my hiding spot, curling up in a large box in my attic. I use this place as a storage and put all kinds of stuff here, so I'm pretty sure they will not be able to find me right away, but I don't think I can hide forever. They will soon get here. It is just a matter of time before they seal my fate with a bloody end. I have nobody to turn to now, so can somebody please tell me how I can make it through the night in one piece? So for the privacy of my fellow workers, myself, and the store, I'm going to avoid using real names. Got it? Okay, here we go. I'm a 16-year-old high school student who just got a job at a new grocery store near my home. I work in the produce department, and I like all of the people I work with as well. We are expected to be on our best behavior due to our store's reputation for being the best for customer service. Also, the president of the company lives right around the corner. I have a friend in the bakery, right next to my department. I will call her Jay. She will be important later. I found out that I was working the 5 to 10 shift on Halloween, which sucked, because I had already been invited to a friend's party from 5 to 10. I didn't mind working the closing shifts, because they were often quiet. Whenever you close, you always work with one other person. When I got there, I found out there was a fair amount of customer traffic. I was expecting kids to come and bug us for candy, or for me to stand outside to make sure no one stole our pumpkins. But no, I was told to do the front tables. Rotate product, clean display, help customers find the berries that are right behind them. You know, regular business. It was around 7:30 when this guy came in wearing a plaid shirt, blue jeans, work boots, and a white plain mask, with a hood on. He looked about the same age and height of myself, and he had something in his hand. I watched for a second. He just stood there looking around, so putting on my customer service smile, I walked over to him and asked if he had trouble finding anything. He just looked at me and asked where Jay was. Lucky for Jay, she had the foresight to take the Halloween shift off, so she could go trick-or-treating with her younger siblings. I told him she wasn't here right now, and asked if he had a message to give her. Nope, he said, and just stood there, and then walked out. The whole time something in my gut told me this guy was off, almost like a primal instinct that he had no good intentions. I thought it might have been one of her friends that I just didn't recognize, or someone pulling a prank. I shrugged it off and continued working. A little bit later, I was given the go-ahead to go on my 15-minute break. I got my slice of pizza and drink, paid for it, or else I get fired for company theft, and went up to the break room for a nice dinner. A little bit about the floor plan. Produce is in the front of the store to give the idea that our fresh foods carry on throughout the store. Most grocery stores do this as well. Then we have the hot food counter and bakery sharing the same space. Then along the back wall is the bakery, seafood, and meat departments. Then you have the dairy along the side wall with grocery and wellness in the middle. Behind the back wall is a narrow corridor that stretches from one end to the other. This is used to get the product from the loading bay to each department's cooler and freezer, with the door to the break room in the middle of the corridor. There's constantly people moving trucks, carts we use to deliver product around the floor, and moving garbage. We also have all emergency doors only able to be open from the inside. This will all be important later. As I enter the door in between the seafood and bakery, I notice something on the ground. It's a name tag. Not only that, but my name tag. I think it must have fallen off, but I notice I'm still wearing mine. The employee number is on the back, and it's also the exact same as mine. I picked it up and took it with me up to the break room. The break room isn't much to look at. Some tables and chairs, fridge, sink, counter, TV that doesn't work, lockers, bathroom, etc. I sit down to eat my pizza when I hear something else open the door to the break room and started climbing the stairs. Probably someone else going on their 15, I thought to myself, but I listened into the footsteps and something wasn't right. They weren't normal. They were rhythmic. Bang, bang, bang. Each one waiting exactly 1 second before taking the next. Suddenly, that primal feeling came back to me. The footsteps got louder. Bang, bang, bang. They were at the top. From where I was sitting, I had a perfect view of the hallway that led to the stairs, and I was waiting for the person to come around the corner. Then I saw him. Around the corner poked a man in a plaid shirt, hood, and a white mask. I jumped a bit when I saw him, then got up and asked him to leave, and told him that he was in an employee-only area. He did nothing. I got up to go and call for the manager when he ducked back around the corner. I heard him jump down the stairs. Yes, I mean jumped down the 20 stairs. And I rushed because I thought he hurt himself. When I looked down the stairwell, he was gone. I didn't even hear the door open or close. I finished my break and went to find the other guy working with me that night. Let's call him T. T was a full-timer who helped me out when I was just training. He was a big and intimidating guy, but a gentle giant. I found him and told him about the guy and how he just vanished. He said he would talk to someone about it and told me to take a load of boxes down to the baler. It compacts cardboard into a massive cube. I took the load into the hallway. Since our area is on the other end of the store, I had to walk the entire length of the corridor. As I walked past each area, getting a nose full of each department, I noticed something. I noticed how empty the corridor was. Sure, we were pretty much a ghost crew tonight, but there would always be someone back here. I also noticed something over the annoying music that blast on repeat. I noticed the faint sound of my footsteps echoing. I knew for a fact that there is zero echo in that hallway. Sure, sound is amplified, but it never echoes. I had read through enough scary stories to know that an unusual echo probably means that someone is following you. I turn around and the echo stops. But I hadn't stopped walking. I was freaked out and brought the load to the baler in hopes of finding the shipment specialist, someone whose job it is to record and direct the movement of new shipments of products. When I got there, no one was there. Odd, I thought. Normally the specialist is always here. I calm myself down by saying that I was just tired and my ADHD is getting the better of me. I start loading boxes into the baler when I hear a faint noise again, the sound of whispering. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I thought it was just some other workers, until I heard one of the pallets of food move on its own. Now, those pallets are made of wood, so they are hard to move on their own, but add about 100 pounds of product, and that is impossible. I turn around to see who or what moved it. I looked around and saw a pallet had been moved slightly, blocking my way out. Great, I thought to myself. There still was room for me to squeeze through, but my truck wasn't going to fit. Then I heard the whispering again, from behind me this time. That primal feeling came back again. Now I'm not that big of a guy. I'm around 5'6" and pretty scrawny, but I had my box cutter on me. The company provides box cutters to certain departments. I turned around, expecting to see a coworker playing a prank, but instead, I saw it. The man was standing at the other end of the loading bay facing me. "Where's Jay?" he said. Something was different about him. His mask was different. It was smiling. Not a happy smile. No. It was a twisted, satanic, sinister smile. I had my hand on my box cutter. I asked the man to leave and that he wasn't allowed back here. Then he laughed. It was a distorted, almost unrecoverable cackle. I was done. I noped the fuck out of there. Sprinted down the hallway as the laughing grew louder and louder. I ran into the produce cooler at the end of the hallway and ran right into T, spilling the blueberries he was carrying. He asked me what was wrong and I answered back. The man. I was beginning to cry as I tried to explain the whole story to him. We got the manager and 5 others and did a full and thorough search of each area. Nothing. The only thing they found was my truck, box cutter that I dropped, and the moved pallet. They had also found one of the fire escape doors to have been opened, believing that was the way he escaped. They checked the CCTV. Thankfully, they were all over the store. I didn't want to see them. When they returned, they were as white as a wall. The camera feed showed the man entered through the fire escape and began messing with me the whole night. The next morning, I got an extra bonus and a story to tell my friends. I told Jay at school about the whole event and she was uneasy. I'm refusing to do the night shifts, and I refuse to go back there by myself anymore. I don't normally pick up hitchhikers, and this night was no exception. Don't get me wrong, I like the idea of hitchhiking. There's something romantic about a simpler time when you could travel across the country by relying on the goodwill of strangers, where you could pick someone up in your car and get to know them, hear about their journeys, and keep yourself entertained on your trip. I think it was some well-publicized murders in the 70s that changed all of that. Once people associated hitchhiking with psychotic killers, nobody really wanted to pick anyone up, and fewer people wanted to go hitchhiking. People thought all of the people you might deal with while hitchhiking as being dangerous, and most people stayed away from the activity. As a result, in a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, I think it led to hitchhiking becoming more dangerous. After all, once all the normal people shied away from it, who was left? The people you actually had to worry about, and once that's the case, there's no reason for any normal person to pick up hitchhikers. And there's no reason for any normal person, outside of dire circumstances, to attempt hitchhiking. And so, the pool of people stays the same, kind of a simultaneous action problem, as economists would say. So that night, driving down a rural highway, safe in my metal box, I see a man on the side of the highway, thumb outstretched. Stopping to pick him up wasn't an option. He didn't look particularly dangerous, wearing khakis and a button-up shirt, and as my headlights dragged over his face, he didn't look malicious, just sad if anything. The poor guy probably just had car troubles, or, since I don't remember seeing a car on the side of the road, maybe he had walked there, or was dropped off by someone else. Whatever it was, I was sure it's a problem that he could solve with making a phone call. After all, it was 2019. Surely this guy had a smartphone in his pocket. I justified to myself as I passed by him, so I didn't feel bad about leaving him there. Well, maybe a little bit, but not enough to slow down. The road went on, dark except for my headlights. Except for the occasional light from a roadside gas station or a small farm town, I barely saw anything until maybe 40 minutes later when I saw another hitchhiker walking up the road, back to me and thumb out. But as I got closer, I realized they were wearing the same clothes, the same button-up, same slacks, almost. I remember the first guy looking like he had just left his car. This one now, he looked like he had been out there for days, his cuffs dirty and his shirt sweat-stained. As I drove past, the curiosity got the best of me, and I slowed down a bit to rubberneck. He must have noticed, because he turned to face me, and his face, it was the same man. I recognized him instantly, but different. When I saw him before, he looked sad but otherwise fine. Now he looked horrible. His clean-cut chin had turned into a scraggly beard. His left eye was darkened and swollen. Some kind of milky yellow substance dried on his neck and chest. I realized he couldn't see into my car. It was dark and my headlights were on. But in that moment, I swore he made eye contact with me. I panicked and swerved. I saw the edge of the road rushing up to me and slammed on the brakes, stalling my car, but stopping before I went off the asphalt. Normally when you have a near accident like that, you want to stop and take stock for a moment, but I heard the hitchhiker's voice coming up to me. "Don't go, man. Give me a ride." His voice was as raspy and beat up as his face looked. I turned to see him moving towards me, 100 feet or so. I could see now that he had a bit of a limp, and was moving as fast as he could with it. His face looked manic, like a starving dog that you just dropped a steak in front of. "Let me in. Yo, you have to let me in." Apparently I didn't though. I turned on the engine and got out of there as fast as I could. He yelled something as I peeled out of there, but I couldn't hear him. I didn't need to. I just needed to put as much space between that guy and me as I could, and so I was off. Once I got off the immediate area and the sounds of terrible rural radio replaced the panic in my head, I thought about it. This was so weird. That was definitely the same guy, right? It really looked like him, but it couldn't be. He couldn't have passed me on foot, and I didn't see a single other car on the road since I saw him the first time, so he couldn't have caught a ride with someone else and passed me that way. Unless they took another road and got ahead of me. I tried my best to mentally picture the road map of the area I was in, to see if that made any sense. I couldn't remember if there was a parallel path that another driver could have taken, but there had to be, right? Nothing else made any sense. It was a hitchhiker that got a ride with some leadfoot that passed me and dropped him off up ahead, and for some reason, he looked a lot worse than when I saw him first. Maybe I just didn't get a good enough look at him before, or maybe he spilled some food on himself. That was a sensible explanation. I placated myself with these thoughts. I justified why this was all fine, and I even let my mind wander to other things by the time I saw the hitchhiker the third time. Even though my mind was wandering, I made an effort to take note of any of the roads I passed after the second time I saw him. There were a few exits to other paths, going perpendicular to my route, but that's it. There's no way he could have caught a ride and passed me again. It was impossible. And I had gotten a good look at him the second time I drove past him. I made note of his face, and he looked different again. His pants, now beyond dirty, were ripped up. Fabric hung in strips from his knees down to his ankles, and he was missing a shoe. His button-up shirt was now of some indeterminate original color. It was so covered with dirt and stains. And his face was horrifying. It wasn't just dirty anymore. It was covered in boils, some oozing down his face. The pus or whatever foul liquid it was mixed with. Blood, appeared to be coming from some injury above his hairline. And not only that, but he looked gaunt. His cheeks were hollow like he had not eaten in days. I noticed all of this as I passed him, but I did not slow down. I did not want to make the same mistake last time, and even give him a chance at catching up to me. I floored it, but as I passed him, he seemed to notice me. I saw recognition in his face, and I saw him smile. Not the same desperation on his face, but a kind of glee. Once he was safely out of T-1000 car catching distance, I stopped looking back and kept my eyes squarely on the road in front of me. I didn't know what was going on, but I was looking forward to getting to my destination, lying in bed, and having this whole thing be a weird story I told people instead of something I am currently living. But that's not what happened. Almost as soon as I got my eyes on the road ahead of me, it was gone. I don't know how to explain it. 1 second my headlights were illuminating empty asphalt, and then the next, they were just shining on empty air. I felt my stomach drop, like it does when you're a passenger in a car, and the driver crests the top of a hill at just the right speed. The terrestrial vision of those zero-G airplanes, when it feels like you are free-falling with nothing holding you up. And I'm not even sure anything was holding me up. I couldn't see the road. I couldn't feel gravity keeping me against the car seat. I was just adrift. And then I wasn't. The car felt like it hit something hard, and the wrong way. I heard the sickening sound of metal scraping underneath me. I felt an impact, and my seatbelt dig into me. There was the horrible calamity of something big and destructive and unknown happening to my car. When it stopped, I looked up. I felt woozy. The road was back in front of me. I didn't know what was going on. I reached for the key to see if the car would start, but it wasn't there. The steering wheel wasn't there. I didn't know what had happened. In my mind, I got in my head that I needed to exit the car and assess the damage. I reached for the door handle, and thankfully it was there, but it felt wrong. It was different, and it was turning the wrong way, and it just moved softly in my hand. I didn't feel the usual pressure from it grabbing the latch and pulling it open. "Sorry, man, I can't help you." The voice came from my left and startled me. I backed away from it and stumbled, falling to my right and landing on the hard concrete. I was so confused. I looked up again at my car door, but it wasn't my car door. It wasn't the inside of my car. I was outside of a car. How did I get here? You're confused. I was too. But those are the rules. I put aside the confusion about my position and looked up at the voice. Inside a car I didn't recognize was the man, the hitchhiker. He was sitting in the driver's seat, talking across the passenger seat to me. His window was cracked an inch so I could hear him. How did I get here? I asked, not knowing what else to say. Same way I did, man. It happened to me, and now it happened to you. It didn't make any sense. What happened to me? I don't know what it is. I'm just glad it's not me anymore. He laughed, and then honked his horn in joy. I looked down. I was definitely in the road. My car was gone. What was going on? I'll tell you what, though. I can tell you what I know. I'm not a bad guy, and I'm sure you're not terrible either. I mean, you could have stopped for me back there and saved us both a lot of trouble. But I guess I can't be too mad, because I didn't stop for the last guy either. What do you know? That's right. What the last guy told me when I was in your position. You see, he was cursed, and it got passed on to me, and now it's been passed on to you. Cursed? I mean, I say cursed. I don't know what it really is, but I do know the rules. I had to hitchhike until somebody picked me up. I could never get anywhere but the empty highway, no matter how long I walked. Cars passed me, sometimes the same car over and over. It felt like days or weeks for me, but for you, it was probably just a couple of hours, right? It was like an hour and a half since I first saw you, I admitted. Well, it's been a long hour and a half for me. Time doesn't work the same for you once you're on the outside, but that's all stuff you're going to learn. Here's what you need to be told. If somebody stops and picks you up, the curse is broken. You'll be fine, and you can go back to your life. But if nobody picks you up, he holds his finger up at this point, like he wants me to remember it. If somebody passes you 3 times without getting you, then the curse goes on, but with them, not you. You're free, and they're going to suffer your fate, the fate I've been suffering through. So somebody just needs to pick me up, right? I grab his door handle again and pull on it frantically. Let me in, and the curse will be broken. Doesn't work like that. That's what the last guy told me. It has to be somebody new, somebody who hasn't been through this before. If somebody who has already been through the curse, who carries that stink, picks you up, it just goes back to them again. I plead with him. You don't know that. It's worth a try. Not for me, it's not. I'm done, and I'm over with walking and hitchhiking. If you pass the curse on and want to try giving them a ride, be my guest. But I'm not tempting fate that way. I pull on the door handle harder and bang on the window. Come on, let me in. He turns the key. His car purrs, coming to life. He looks at me like it's the sweetest sound in the world and pulls ahead. He stops to shout out his window. Good luck, man. I mean it. And then drives off. and across the horizon. And he was right. Time does tend to blend together. Sometimes it's day, and I blink, and then it's night. There are things he didn't tell me though, like how I'll be hungry, but I'll never starve to death, no matter how long this goes on. It feels like it's been months, but I can't really know. I also don't know where I am. On the road I was driving, I was just about 15 miles from the next gas station. I've tried walking in a straight line, but it's like I never get there. It's like the scenery changes as soon as I stop paying close attention to it. Sometimes I find myself surrounded by trees instead of farms. I like the trees better. Being in the sun too long, I get so burned and there's no escape. But it's not like I have a choice. Sometimes I find myself on what looks like the same road, but a different part of it than I was on before. I've stopped keeping track. I'm so tired. I can't sleep. No matter how tired I feel, I can just walk or stand still, and cars only show up when I'm walking. They all pass me by. I can see them through the windows. It's easier during the day. They might make eye contact, but they don't stop. None of them stop, but I still keep my thumb out, just in case one does. If you happen to drive by and you see me walking, then for my sake I hope you stop. And if you see me 3 times, then I hope you stop. For your sake. This entry I found in my great-aunt's old journal I dug up while I was cleaning house. In it, she recounts the story of her 2 dear friends, who were sisters that lived right outside her town in the rural countryside. I think she tells their story elegantly, but I can't sleep without the lights on now. I can only hope she found solace in writing this. In the woods, there was a cabin. Inside it lived a young woman of 13. She and her sisters, who were 6.5, would wander outside during the day to forage. One day, the 2 sisters found a dry well outside of a house. It was a part of the woods that their mother warned them not to go, as most of the houses outside of the town were so old that they had begun to deteriorate. When they approached the well, there was a sign hanging above it that said to throw a silver coin and make a wish. The 2 had plenty of silver, which had always held over their want for gold. Each of them had 1 wish. The eldest dropped 2 of their coins down the well. She wished that her sister would knock on her door, instead of coming in right away like she did when she had a nightmare. Truthfully, this only happened on occasion, but it irritated her very much. The younger sister wished for an oil lamp, like the one the eldest had in her room. She rushed to her older sister after a nightmare, because the light dispelled her fears. Neither of them spoke their wish aloud, knowing then that they wouldn't come true if they had. That night, their father came home with a special surprise for the younger sister. He felt, being the responsible girl she was, that she was now old enough to keep an oil lamp in her room. She told her sister that her wish had come true. They said goodnight after supper and each went to bed. They both slept soundly and went on with their normal lives for quite some time. One night, the younger sister had a night terror. She ran toward her door out of habit, but then stopped in her tracks. She turned, and with a flick, the oil lamp filled the room with a warm glow. She took in a deep breath, and after a moment she felt much better. When her sister knocked on her door, she inquired what she was doing up so late in the night, to which her response was that she had a bad dream, but that she was alright. The eldest sister then told her there was a knock on her door that woke her. She came to check on her, but she wasn't there. The younger one denied having gone to the door. It was curious to the young woman, but she went back to bed and didn't think much of it then. Over the years, the knocking on her door would startle her awake on occasion. She rushed to the door and there would be no one there. One night, after their parents had passed on, and each of them moved away from their little home, the eldest discovered that her younger sister had died in a house fire. Her home was reduced to rubble. The old oil lamp, one of a few things that in some way remained. She took the oil lamp and brushed some ashes into an urn, as there was no body to be buried. The eldest grieved all hours of the day and night, until suddenly there was a knock on her door. It was the undertaker, who came in from town after the report of the death. He consoled her for the loss, then left shortly after discovery that there was no business to be had. Finally, after a fortnight bout of insomnia due to her despair, the now much older woman collapsed from exhaustion. Forward, every day she felt a bit better than the last. Soon she got out of the house into town, and went on with her life. One night, she went to bed and slept without tears. she was at peace, when in the middle of the night, there was a knock at her door. It was loud and insistent. She got out of bed to see whoever it could possibly be at the hour. When she opened the door, on the porch, there were 2 silver coins. The story you're about to read is not very scary to the average person, but it's the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. To start, just know I was not in my right mind when this happened. It was about this time a few years ago. I come from a family with a long history of mental illness. My mother is schizoaffective, meaning she struggles with breaks from reality, leading to auditory and visual hallucinations. It's awful to say, because I love my mother, and she works very hard to take care of herself and keep her illness under control with medication and doctor's visits. But I grew up with the greatest fear, being that I would one day be just like her. But my 17th birthday came and passed, as did the next birthday, and the one after that, and the one after that, etc. And it seemed that I would be spared the family curse, as it were. I guess I'm just a late bloomer. What can I say? I was 21 when my depression hit me hard. I was so sick I flunked out of college my senior year. I lost all motivation to go to class. And when I was in class, I was so anxious I couldn't focus. I lost my job, my friends, nearly my apartment, before I attempted suicide, and my roommates, bless them, swooped in to save the day. I won't go into details, but just know I didn't have to go to the hospital. They stopped me in time. My mother came down to Georgia to collect me and take me home to Maine, where I started therapy and some antidepressants and moved on with my life. I moved out a year and a half later and started trying to rebuild my life. I got a job, I started back to school, I couldn't have a dog in my apartment so I adopted a bird. Her name is Reggie. Things seemed to be looking up. I didn't need constant therapy sessions anymore. My med manager was really the only professional I saw. My depression and anxiety became easier and easier to hide. My attempt and utter breakdown, a thing of the past. Something I could even pretend never happened some days. I still struggle to make friends. I can be really loud and annoying when I'm happy, and people don't hesitate to point that out. I didn't mind too much though. I had Reggie, and my mom, and my health. I was good, until I wasn't. My mother lost her job in winter of 2017, and with it, our health benefits. Now, she's protected by the state, due to her illnesses. She still had her Medicare, and could make things work. But my prescriptions went from a $25 copay to $187 for 30 20mg tablets, and that was the generic. I didn't think too much of it. I figured it had been nearly 2 years since I had any issues. Maybe I could handle it. Besides, my job had benefits. I could just enroll in the fall. I just had to make it 8 months. Not a big deal. I took what was left of the Prozac until it was gone, and then I had nothing. I became aware of Felix gradually. He was so subtle in the beginning, just background noise. The product of an overactive imagination, a side effect on the sudden lack of Prozac. Nothing to be overly concerned about. I didn't really notice him until he had thoroughly entangled himself with my psyche. Now, don't panic. This wasn't a demon, or a ghost, or any sort of ghoul. I don't really believe in that stuff. I wish I did. If he had been a spirit, he would have been easier to get rid of. Felix began as just a quiet little murmur in the distance, nothing concrete. I don't remember being at all aware of him, really, in the beginning, but I knew he was there. See, I was working 50+ hours a week trying to help my mom, and juggling a full course load of anatomy, and pharmacology, and calculus to get my nursing degree. I wasn't sleeping a lot. I was very stressed. I could feel my anxiety starting to creep up on me. There are a lot of reasons for Felix's becoming. All the reasons I was able to ignore him for so long. It's just my imagination. I told myself, you're just being crazy. It really started when I began noticing a phenomena. I keep a pretty active inner monologue running in my head, and sometimes things get so heated in there that I end up muttering under my breath things that are meant to stay in my mind. That's what I thought was happening, that I was just saying things out loud by accident. I started to notice someone commenting on my inner thoughts, just like responding to questions like, now where did I put my wallet, when I was in the store, and from the distance I would hear, did you check your pockets? I would turn and no one would be there. I had to be imagining it. Still, I became so paranoid. I started keeping my fingers close to my lips whenever I could, without looking too much like a crazy person, just so I could be sure I wasn't talking to myself. Then one day, it started happening when I was alone. I was cooking dinner and I misplaced something, a knife I think. I was looking for it when all of a sudden a voice said helpfully, "You put it in the sink to wash it." I jumped and spun around. Nothing, no one. Reggie can't talk, she's just a little budgie. And even if she wasn't, no bird can speak so fluidly. It sounded like a man, but no one was there. "Hello?" I asked into the emptiness of my studio apartment. No response except for Reggie softly chirping away in her cage. I must have imagined it, I thought, and turned around to find the knife. "Maybe," said the voice again. These little episodes continued for several months, getting longer and longer all the time. I was terrified. Even in my lowest of points, I know, hearing voices was never a good sign. But Felix consoled me. He pointed out that he was only one voice and that he was nice. My mother always told me her voices were Minnie and mean, calling her awful, nasty things, or telling her to do terrible stuff. But my voice never told me what to do. He just talked to me. Disturbingly, I grew to actually like him. I named him and gave him pronouns and talked back to him, silently in public, but out loud when I was alone. Like on the drive to school or work or in my apartment, I indulged him, I guess. I thought of him as a friend. For months, we would engage in long conversations, making fun of people at work, making plans for the future, talking about my worries for my mom and my health. I started to not want to get rid of Felix. He was nice, helpful even. He seemed to retain things I couldn't in class. He helped me remember where I put stuff, and he wasn't always there. Sometimes he was quiet, sometimes he was quiet for a long time. I missed him when he went away like that. My depression, I found, was a lot harder to handle when it was so quiet in my head. Fall came and I signed up for my benefits. My insurance card came in the mail, and I made my first appointment. Felix changed after that. The week leading up to my first doctor's visit in almost a year was a loud one. Felix never stopped talking. It was hard to sleep, or pay attention in class, or focus at work, and all the things he was saying were, well, not exactly nasty, just... He would say things like, "You don't need meds, they just make you feel foggy. You told me they make you feel foggy." Or, "What if the doctor doesn't believe you?" It all boiled down to one thing. He didn't want me to go. The one good thing I did this entire time was keep in contact with my mom. I never told her about Felix. I never told anyone about him. But I told her about other things, like my ideation, and my terrible mood swings, and my doctor appointment. She was so excited for me. Weird, I know, but she was so excited. I couldn't not go. Besides, how do you get out of going to the doctor? It's not like you can say you're sick. Felix got angrier and more insistent the closer we got to the appointment. The night before, he wouldn't let me go to sleep. "You can't tell," he kept saying. The voice had developed into something stranger as the week went on, and I got less and less sleep. Felix seemed to be coming from the wall. I don't know how to describe it well. It was like the wall was Felix, and he was talking to me. The wall was talking to me, as Felix. Does that make sense? I mean, of course it doesn't. Like I said, I wasn't in my right mind. So anyways, Felix, as the wall, was telling me I couldn't tell the doctor about him. He was worried that they would take him away. "I would miss you," he told me. "I would die without you. I don't want to be alone. You can't tell them. If you tell them, they'll make me leave, and then we'll both die. We'll both be alone. I don't want to be alone again." Retrospectively, I know this was my broken mind expressing fear. Fear of rejection. Fear that no one would believe me. Or worse, fear that they would. And I knew, even then, that the right thing to do would be to tell the doctor all of my symptoms. But I was so tired, and he promised I could sleep if I promised not to tell. So I did. The doctor was nice. She asked me about my health and my stress levels, my eating habits, my sleeping habits. She didn't want to put me back on Prozac right away, but she did refer me to a psychiatrist who'd eventually prescribe me generic Lexapro, which my mom highly recommended, for depression, and lorazepam for insomnia. I never told her about Felix. Felix became very quiet for a while after that. The drug seemed to make it harder for him to speak. like they were sedating him. And the more sleep I was getting, the better I was feeling, and the more clarity I was gaining. One day, when I was at my mom's for a little breakfast date, I was telling her about something funny Felix had said. I remember Felix could be so funny and so sweet. I remember talking to him that morning too, and thinking that he was in a better mood than he'd been in since before I enrolled in healthcare through my work. My mom laughed and asked, "Who's Felix?" wiggling her eyebrows suggestively. I got really quiet, and I guess I must have looked really weird because my mom became suddenly very serious, asking me what was wrong and if I was okay. I told her about Felix. I told her everything, even about how I hadn't told my doctors about him. My mom became very worried and told me to make an appointment right away to discuss it with my doctors. I promised her I would, but remember thinking how mad Felix would be about that. Felix didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. He didn't speak the next day either. I made an appointment for the next week. Felix continued to be silent. I tried to reach out to him, to explain, to tell him it would be okay, to beg him to talk to me. Then, I stopped taking my meds. The day of the appointment, my mom says I called her, crying, sobbing into the phone. I was yelling about how mad I was at her for making me do this, that because of her, Felix was mad at me, that Felix was my only friend, that he loved me, and how could she make me do something that would hurt him? After trying to calm me down for a long time, she finally called 911 and had me brought to the hospital. I don't remember a lot after that, not because they kept me super sedated or anything, but because sometimes when people do stupid things like suddenly stop taking very important mental medications like I did, they can have symptoms of amnesia or lost time. I remember going to the hospital and being admitted. I remember my mom coming to sit with me. I remember her crying. I remember my brother and his wife coming to visit. And I remember asking about their daughter, and being told that I could see her when I was better. I don't remember what order these events happened in, or how many doctors I saw, or what they told me. I was released from the hospital after the customary 3 days, and referred to an intensive outpatient therapy program. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. That later changed to major depressive disorder with psychotic aspects. I have trialed a few different antipsychotics and have been on risperidone for the last year or so. I haven't heard Felix in about 2 years. I mean, I still catch whispers every now and then. And sometimes I could swear that the coffee maker is glaring at me. But now I have a solid support system, including my loving girlfriend who laughs and tells me that the coffee pot is not, in fact, glaring at me. And that it is empty, and we should do something about that. She knows about Felix. A lot of people do. Sometimes I think the more I talk about him, the less likely he is to come back. That the more people who know about him, the weaker he is, and the stronger I am. I still miss him some days. Last week I was telling a friend a joke, and remembered that Felix told it to me. That made me a little sad. I think that's the scariest thing, the fact that even after everything, that even after years of knowing that he isn't real, that some small, broken part of me still loves him. Or no. Maybe the scariest thing is that last night, when I was tucking Reggie into her cage, I could have sworn that she said, "Good night," in Felix's voice. One night, I walked into my bedroom and my TV was on. I didn't leave my TV on. Some commercial was playing, the head of a blandly pretty girl smiling and chattering as she advertised some mediocre product. On a large, high-resolution screen, her face was incredibly realistic and magnified to gargantuan proportions. The moment I entered the room, she stopped talking. She was frozen in time, that disingenuous smile still pasted on her face. Her eyes were unsettling though. They seemed to be trained on me, and the smile did not reach them. Those irises seemed a bit darker than would be normal on a dime-a-dozen TV ad actress. She also seemed weirdly familiar, as if I had seen her before. I shrugged it off. I live in a rural area, and sometimes the satellite signal is spotty. I had to walk across the room to retrieve the remote. I tried not to look at the TV screen as I did so. Those eyes on the back of my neck made my skin itch and crawl. I hit the power button on the remote. Nothing happened. I slapped it against my hand a few times, still refusing to look at the screen as I did so. I wasn't sure why. There was no reason to avoid it. TV screens don't change on their own. They're just pixels. programmed to display certain colors at certain times, forming predetermined images that are totally under the control of the programmers and filmmakers of the world. Pure science, pure technology, nothing weird, right? Right. Freaking useless batteries, I hissed. I just changed them a week ago. The frequency and intensity of the remote slapping increased, until the tattoo I was drumming against my hand reached a panicky tempo. I felt sweat beading on my temples. My hand was getting numb from being slapped by the thin stick of dysfunctional plastic. Finally, I gave it up as a bad job. Still not looking at the screen, my back to the television, I lowered the remote and covered my face with my hands. My breath came in heaves and gasps. I could not pinpoint what had inspired this racking terror in me. I knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that if I looked at that screen, I would see something that would destroy my sanity. I began to shake with fear and nerves. The sweat that had dotted my temples now ran down my face in salty rivulets. Some got into my mouth. It tasted very salty and metallic. Too salty, too metallic. With a shock, I pulled my hands away from my face to find them dripping in blood. Was I sweating blood? That was absurd, surely, and yet it ran down my fingers, palms, and wrists in thickly clotting streams. I rolled around. I had to know what was happening, even if it cost me my mind. There she was, on the screen. It was the same still frame, with one difference. Her smile was wrenched into a torturous scream. A single line of blood dripped from the corner of her lips. I couldn't help myself. Despite my gory hands, I covered my eyes again, unable to look any longer, and I screamed. I'm not sure how long I screamed. I know something in my throat tore a little, because I felt it give. Eventually, I passed out. When I woke up, the lights were on and the TV was playing normally again. I felt like a mop that had been wrung out too harshly. Every tendon and muscle fiber in my body screamed with protest as I propped myself up. My hands. Startling, I remembered and looked down. My hands were perfectly clean. There was no trace of blood anywhere. I ran to the mirror above my vanity and found that my face too was untouched. Was I dreaming? Terrible dream if I was. I had been working extremely hard though lately, and my mind had been dark in general. My job was providing little payoff compared to the stress it was causing me, and another set of holidays were fast approaching, in which I would yet again be single. It wasn't beyond the realm of reason that a morbid dream could be born of these woes. The human mind is a funny thing. Having blown off my terror is nothing more than a product of stress and loneliness. I picked up the discarded remote. The horrible commercial was playing again. This time though, the pretty blonde's vapid smile never froze, and her eyes stayed a perfectly reasonable shade of blue. I clicked the television off. It obeyed this time, but not immediately. For a split second before the TV turned off, it froze again, her face in the same expression as before, smiling in that hideous way. She was watching me, and she was not going to let me go easily. Then, in a horrible lurch, I realized where I had seen her before. That was my face. She has my face. The TV clicked off. The darkness was pure and absolute, as was the silence.